For over 70 years, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Marin has worked to inspire joy and justice in an imperfect world, sharing life's journey, celebrating many paths, and acting to make a difference. UU Marin celebrates people from all walks of life. No matter how you make your living or how you experience the sacred, no matter who you are, where you're from, or who you love, you are welcome here. If you're seeking open-hearted community, a place where you can have a real day-to-day impact in the world, and a space for the whole family to grow spiritually, come check out the church at the top of the hill. Come join UU Marin.
And today's theme touches on healing after heartbreak. This next song, performed by James Blanchard, comes from an opera by Handel, where the female protagonist has been captured. Separated from the one she loves, she sings Lascia ch'io pianga, mia cruda sorte, which means, let me weep over the harsh reality facing me. It's an expression of mourning with similarities to what many of us have felt.
Lascia ch'io pianga mia dura sorte e che sospiri la libertà e che sospiri e che sospiri la libertà. Lascia ch'io pianga la dura sorte e che sospiri la libertà. Il duol infranga questa ritorte de miei martiri sol per pietà sì de miei martiri sol per pietà. Lascia ch'io pianga la dura sorte e che sospiri la libertà e che sospiri e che sospiri la libertà. Lascia ch'io pianga la dura sorte e che sospiri la libertà.
I love this story of the cracked pot. and it reminds me of a Japanese art form called kintsugi. Does anyone know what kintsugi is? Quite a few. I have a picture. It didn't print out very well, but you can see a bowl, a broken pottery bowl that is fused together with a golden glue. I actually lived in Japan for about half a year, and I didn't know about kintsugi, but I learned about it later through my own healing journey. And it is an ancient art form that involves, repairing all these different broken pieces together. And I was looking for ways to describe it, and I came across this phrase from the artist Teresita Fernandez, and I love what she said about kintsugi. She said, "Often we try to repair broken things in such a way as to conceal the repair and make it just good as new. But the tea masters understood that by repairing the broken bowl with the distinct beauty of radiant gold, they could create an alternative to good as new, and instead employ a better than new aesthetic. For artful repair adds value." Long before I knew what this word meant, I had to learn my own form of kintsugi, as I had to repair myself from my own trauma. As I turned 16, my family moved cross-country from upstate New York to eastern Washington state. It was culture shock, it was landscape shock, it was friendship shock. It was really hard to fit in. Fitting in at the time, including wearing the right flannel grunge outfits, listening to lots of Alice in Chains and the right grunge music, and going to grungy parties. At one particular party, there was all that Alice in Chains music playing upstairs, but downstairs there was lots of rooms where there was no music. I ended up in one of these rooms, and something unwanted happened to me by someone that I knew. I was too inebriated to stop him. I didn't tell people because I was too confused and I was too full of shame. This was way before Me Too, and I, along with many other young women, didn't have the confidence to stand up for myself. Even today, young women are not always believed. Plus, I really didn't want to hurt my parents. I love them. I don't want to bring them down with me. My physical bruises lasted a week, but my psychological ones years. When I went to college, they had all those Take Back the Night marches. I didn't go. It wasn't my thing. It felt too raw, and I needed a different type of healing. So instead, I went to Spain, the first of many overseas adventures where I gained confidence and I gained strength. My kintsugi golden glue is speckled with international glitter. It involves studying abroad, working abroad. I learned how to do triathlons. I ran races, and I went to this really dirty kickboxing gym off of Venice in San Francisco so I could learn how to kickbox. I wanted my body to feel strong and powerful, and I wanted to be connected to a world much greater than a lame high school party with drunk teenagers. I was determined that I would rise up from shame, and I would become a fearless warrior. Still me, but a different version of me, with golden glue. Despite later workplace harassment and people telling me I was just a silly blonde, I believed I had more to offer and more to do. So when a woman actually told me I should dye my hair darker to be taken more seriously, I dyed it blonder. I kept up with athletic prowess. I learned new kickboxing routines. I put myself through grad school. I paid off the student loans. I bought a house, and I even did a sprint triathlon. I placed third. Only one I ever did, though, but. My grandfather used to say that I was made of steel. Little did he know it was not steel, but a golden glue holding together so many different broken shards. Would I have done all I did if I were not trying to heal? Would I be the feminist that I am today? Would I be as compassionate? Remember, artful repair adds value. However, now, post-election, I feel like I might come apart. We have a sexual predator as a president. People voted for him. When I see those ugly memes of boys taunting young girls with that horrible phrase, your body, my choice. I want to take all my shards and hurl them at them. I want to hurt them. I want to destroy them and anyone that would think that way and hurt other women or, God forbid, my daughter. I want to destroy out of my own pain and my own fear. And remember, I've been trained in that dirty kickboxing gym. I know how to throw a really good punch. But throwing punches kind of goes against our Unitarian theme and value of repair. It's this fear and this violence that got us here, this othering and grouping people together and thinking everything about them must be bad. 50% of the US population can't be bad. Maybe people voted the way they did because they understand things differently than I do. Maybe they voted out of their own pain. Maybe they don't know about Kanzuki and haven't found their golden glue. Or maybe they're actually quite whole as they are, which is the time to admit that one of my closest friends is a Republican. Over our 20 years of friendship, Monica and I have talked a little bit about politics, but our friendship actually grew from other topics that were very important to young women in San Francisco: boys, costume parties, and the next ski trip. When I first told her about this new Unitarian church I joined, I gushed on how welcoming it was, but she raised an eyebrow at me. Oh, really? Do you really think it's inclusive, or does everyone think the same way? Would you let me, a Republican, enter? What if I wore a MAGA hat? Would you pretend you didn't know me? I didn't think so, but I wasn't sure. I mean, now I'm reopened and hurting. And I should also say, for the record, my friend is not a MAGA Republican, but some of her beliefs are different than mine. However, she's a very good person. She knows every crack in my being and has many times been my golden glue. When my ex-partner initially ignored my pregnancy, she insisted on coming with me to my first ultrasound. And she held my hand and she told me, Heidi, no matter what happens, you got this and I got you. In my current despair, can I listen to more people like her that were there for me? Can I take the time to understand other people's beliefs? I mean, if I'm honest, I just want to listen to the New Yorker. But my mother, who possesses far more grace than me, urges understanding. She read this book after the 2016 election that she still talks about quite a bit. It's called How to Overcome Toxic Polarization, The Way Out. And they reference this experiment where they bring all these different people together that think differently, and they invite them, and they have these little dinners. And the goal is not to debate differences or win arguments. The goal is understanding. And after this kind of experimental dinner with different people from different sides, each person left much more entrenched in their own beliefs than when they entered. They were firmly, assured that they had the right way of thinking. However, they respected the other side. And they saw the other person with a different viewpoint as a human being that they could understand and feel some compassion for. Some differences, like when it comes to sexual harassment, are probably too big a gap for me to bridge, but I think there are some other differences that I can maybe come to understand and respect. My mother tells me we cannot other each other anymore. We should not call large groups of people deplorables when we have not taken the time to listen to their story. And I know a talk on forgiveness is not for this month. We talked about that last month. But I'm not sure how to repair without it. Many years ago, I had to forgive myself. And I still do. Every day, for all my shortcomings and mistakes as a human and as a mother, and plus, trust me, I make plenty of mistakes as a mother, my daughter will tell you. But this is how I stay melded together like the Kanzuki art form. It is how I hope we can maybe start to repair this country, not by fear, not by strength, but by compassion. And maybe a few trips to the kickboxing gym. I happen to know one.
And the Good morning. It's only a distant memory now. Rising at 5:30, showering and dressing without disturbing the family, racing to beat the traffic to the heart of Atlanta and a shiny new 51-story skyscraper. No time for reflection or greeting the day, just racing into battle. Now in retirement, I rise when I wake, using the alarm only when the day calls for a special adventure, like conducting bird surveys at Point Reyes or driving to Santa Cruz to work on our son's house. Sadly, that's over. The house is finished. For years after I retired, I turned my head toward the window when I woke, gazed at the big trees behind the house, beech, black cherry, tulip, poplar, tupelo, oak, and welcomed the new day by reciting the salutation to the dawn. You know it. We say it here. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, and so on. But a few months ago, even as Election Day neared, I began to wake to a new sensation, to a sense of gratitude, an awareness of my very good fortune. I began to call up those things for which I'm grateful and silently name them. My spouse, still asleep beside me, and much more. But not the morning after election night. That night I went to bed after Pennsylvania was called and Wisconsin looked ready to fall. I woke in despair, brokenhearted, and spent the day listening to postmortems on public radio, watching them on MSNBC, reading them in the newspapers until I'd had enough. It was clear what had happened and why, multiple factors, the big inflation factor. No need to argue with voters through the television set after the fact. Thursday morning, I joined Sarah Tiederman's gathering for UU Marin folks at the Civic Center, where we walked and talked only minimally about the election, but simply supporting each other with our presence. That afternoon, I baked a loaf of sourdough bread, focusing on the process, nothing else. Getting the water temperature right, dissolving salt and honey, adding the starter, then flour until the consistency was right, and kneading. The kneading. Leaning in with the palm of my hand, folding the dough, leaning in again, relying on decades-old muscle memory, and feeling the joy of pulling the finished loaf from the oven. Late in the afternoon, I hiked up a steep fire road to the top of the ridge above our valley. An unexpected peacefulness came over me. I'm often in nature, admiring it, but this afternoon, I was seeing it in a surprisingly spiritual way. A little brown creeper on a tree right beside the trail, doing its brown creeper thing, walking up the trunk, poking its sharp little beak into crevices in the bark, looking for insects, then fluttering back down and repeating it. Smiling, I watched it until it disappeared into the foliage. As the trail descended to the valley floor, the sun having set and the sky yellow above ridge tops to the west, I turned a corner and encountered a young buck with 2 tiny horns, standing in the middle of the road, eyeing me, thinking about challenging me, perhaps, as I stood motionless just a few yards away. After a minute or so, it had second thoughts and sauntered slowly up a grassy slope into the trees. Then, back near the valley floor as dusk deepened, house lights aglow, an owl emerged from the trees and flew slowly over me in silhouette toward the mouth of the valley, flapping and gliding, flapping and gliding. The next morning, Friday, a similar experience. Opening the blinds in the bedroom and seeing the birds in the feeders, feeling my heart swell with joy at the sight of the common, ordinary birds who are always there, old friends. What's going on here, I wondered. I've been broken, heartbroken. The country is at a dangerous precipice, and I'm filled with joy and wonder in a fascinating, unfamiliar way. I'm often filled with joy in nature. What's different? There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in, Leonard Cohen sings in his song Anthem. Is there a crack in me? Is this light flowing in? Is this what's warming me in these strange ways? In the introduction to the November Soul Matters materials, the theme of which is repair, Reverend Scott Taylor, the founder and team leader of the UU Soul Matters group, writes, quote, "It's one of the most important but paradoxical spiritual truths there is. Broken people end up bigger people. Because of the cracks in our heart, it becomes capable of expanding. Because we've been torn, we are no longer who we are no longer ends at the barrier of our own skin." Taylor is saying that our awareness of other people grows. I would suggest that our awareness of the rest of creation grows also, to non-humans, birds, yes, and the little lizard that scurries out of our path, and everything else, plant, animal, mineral, sky, and sea. Many of us go for a walk in nature when in pain or distress, anguish, and despair. When we do, is it the pain of brokenness moving us to a new awareness of interconnectedness? Was that the case for Ralph Waldo Emerson, I wonder, our wise ancestor, Unitarian ancestor from Concord, Massachusetts, in his dawning awareness of interconnectedness? In his 1837 essay, Nature, he writes, "Crossing a bare common in snow puddles at twilight under a clouded sky, without having in my thoughts any occurrence of special good fortune, I have enjoyed a perfect exhilaration. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part and particle of God." A few years later, he describes that universal being as the Oversoul, the eternal one, a universal soul connecting all of us and allowing for a sense of compassion. In his book, Being Peace, Thich Nhat Hanh takes this sense of compassion further. He speaks of the understanding it can lead to. When you understand, you cannot help but love, he says, and goes on. To develop understanding, you have to practice looking at all living things with the eyes of compassion. When you understand, you love. And when you love, you naturally act in a way that can relieve the suffering of people. Scott Taylor suggests that brokenheartedness, is an entree to compassion and to the understanding that flows from compassion. He says, "Broken hearts hurt, but they also let in and allow us to connect with the pain of others. Protected hearts may seem safe, but our armor only ends up being a straitjacket. This came home to me recently, not long after I'd read those lines. Months ago, a friend shared a painful experience with me. I listened, I sympathized, but I didn't understand. Didn't really understand. Not until I experienced a similar kind of pain, and in a subsequent conversation with them, it struck me how differently I heard them. I felt their pain. I knew it viscerally. My sympathy had turned to empathy. I had connected through a new crack in my armor. Opportunities in our daily lives for such connection are limited. Some of us have many close friends beyond this church with whom they are able to engage deeply, near and far, old and new. Others of us are less fortunate. So this spiritual religious community is particularly important as a place for such engagement. I think it's a perfect such place. When Kate and I discovered the UU Society of Geneva, Illinois, many years ago, we have another Geneva person in this congregation. We went for our two young boys, one just a few weeks old, the other just 2, for their ethical and moral development, and for our spiritual sustenance and inspiration, also hoping to meet people and make some friends in a new place. When I told a retired UU minister friend of my parents, who was recently retired from the UU seminary in Chicago, Meadville, Lombard, that we'd started to attend, he replied, "It's a community." I didn't really know what that meant because I'd never been in a religious community as an adult. I didn't know the significance of real community, but I know now. How fortunate we are in this beloved community to feel safe enough to share our brokenness, to be vulnerable enough to reveal our cracks as Heidi has so bravely today, to elicit and to extend true compassion, to expand our hearts and grow to wholeness. Here in this community, we celebrate each other's joys. We hold each other in our sorrows and setbacks. Now, when we're grieving for what we've lost, in despair, fearful of what's to come, the beloved community reminds us that love has not died. It buoys us, reminding us of all we have to be thankful for. There's irony in this massive heartbreak occurring just before our national ritual of Thanksgiving. Surely we're not thankful for this. If we're fortunate enough, we'll gather around the table with family and friends, give thanks for our blessings, food, family, friends, share a bountiful meal, go for a pleasant walk. Some of us will watch football. But just maybe, through our experience here of the connectedness that comes from sharing our pain and sorrow as well as our joy, a new awareness will dawn on us that our brokenness can be a great gift for which we can be grateful, as Heidi has illustrated so beautifully today. During this season, when we sometimes give just lip service to gratitude, maybe we can express real gratitude for this gift. The election has broken our hearts, our politics are broken, the national discourse is broken, our governmental institutions are broken, trust is broken. These larger things are not easily repaired. Repairing them will take years. And although no one individual can repair them, repair must start with individuals. We can repair ourselves slowly, thoughtfully, by acknowledging the cracks in our armor, letting the light in, becoming more compassionate, more understanding, more loving, deepening our connections with others, and in the process, becoming more capable of affecting positive, just change in the world. Thich Nhat Hanh again. When you understand, you love. When you love, you naturally act in a way that can relieve the suffering of people. But Thich Nhat Hanh also counsels us, quote, not to let anxiety about what happens in the world fill our hearts, his words, for that will prevent us from helping to heal the world. On January 13th, 2014, almost 11 years ago, demonstrators gathered at the Georgia State Capitol to advocate for expansion of Medicaid in the state. The state was pushing back against the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare. Among them was the Reverend William Barber, then North Carolina president of the NAACP and leader of the Moral Monday movement. And since then, the founding director of the Center for Public Theology and Public Policy at Yale Divinity School. Barber came across several dozen UU demonstrators from Atlanta area congregations gathered there in their yellow t-shirts, my wife Kate among them, and said, "You're UUs. I know you. You're the love people." Which is to say, we're already doing it, striving to understand, to love, and to act in ways that can relieve the suffering of people. When we bring the pieces of our brokenness together and deepen our resources of compassion, we can bend the arc of the moral universe a little more toward justice. Like you, I imagine, I'm still hurting, at times anxious, disoriented, feeling unmoored. But I take comfort in knowing that here in this community, we have a safe harbor, a place to heal, and a place to gather strength for the fight ahead, building something new from our broken pieces, a repair worthy of the effort. In a newspaper article about Reverend Barber's Moral Monday movement and that Atlanta demonstration, a South Carolina state representative from Selma, one Hank Sanders, said, "You have to keep fighting and the changes will come. Victory is in the struggle." May it be so.